Edward Calderwood was sitting in his bed, staring at the shadows that surrounded him. His memories recalled dark whispers and glowing red eyes, yet the dream faded too quickly for him to ponder about its origin. He had woken up repeatedly in the middle of the night with sweat on his brow the last few weeks. Nothing seemed to help improve his situation, not magic, not medicine. A rustle made him cut his eyes to the window. There was nothing but darkness behind the glass, and Edward was sure no one would sneak up on him. Yet his heart raced uncontrollably. Ignoring his paranoid state of mind, he laid back again and listened to the silence. For a second he seemed to hear a whisper, but the words were strange and inaudible. The occultist forced himself to breathe slowly and analyze himself with a clear head like he had done so often. Just like before, he couldn't come up with a plausible explanation. He had suspected his nephew to be behind the unknown horror startling him at night, but he had taken care of him a long time ago, and to his utter satisfaction, the boy had never displayed any talent when it came to using his gift successfully. Edward closed his eyes, seeking comfort in the darkness of his own mind. He wouldn't sleep again tonight. He knew that. Appointments had already been cancelled to help him recover. Only the most necessary affairs, which could not wait, he still attended to. People already started to worry if the death of his brother and the disappearance of his nephew had left him with too much grief. After all, the Calderwoods were one of the greatest in their field when it came to protecting the United Kingdom from any threats of the supernatural realm. The government knew if they were to fall, it would leave the citizens of the crown vulnerable for a long time until someone else would take on the mantle. Edward refused to let that happen. His family had been serving the crown for generations. He would not let his ancestors down by driving his inheritance into ruin. Honoring his brother's memory and keeping Britain safe had been the reason why he had become head of the family. When the first sunbeams shone through the window, Edward decided to stop dozing and start acting. As Mr. Hatz brought the tea, the tall man thought for a moment about the possibility of the liquid containing poison. He quickly discarded the idea. Dreams were nothing but shadows, and he wouldn't allow them to control his actions and thoughts in the waking life. "Sir," the black-haired butler announced, "Mr. Cooper will be here by midday." "Mr. Cooper?" Edward uttered as he tried to recall what the reason for the visit could be. "Yes, sir." Mr. Hatz looked a bit worried when Edward didn't remember the appointment at once. "His wife is still deathly sick, and the doctors can't help her." The occultist flicked his wrist as the memory came back to him. "Yes, I recall. That would be all. Thank you." Mr. Hatz bowed his head and left the room. Edward stared at his breakfast. His stomach protested even when the man only thought about food. Suddenly he felt a presence, a shadow sneaking up behind him. He forced himself to ignore the sinister entity that resided out of the human eye's reach, even if every hair on his body stood up. When the inaudible whisper sounded once again, he got up and turned around in one jerky motion. "Who's there? Show yourself!" With the knife still in his hand, he remained still, listening to his own rapid breathing. Nothing moved. The presence seemed to have faded into obscurity. Regaining his composure, Edward put back the knife and opened the window. Fresh, cold autumn air flooded the room. It wouldn't be long now until the veil separating the worlds was thinnest. Perhaps his dreams were the product of restless ghosts haunting him. His brother wanted his son to be the new head of the family after all. Shaking his head, the man got rid of his worries once and for all. Later, when Mr. Cooper arrived, Edward had calmed himself enough to concentrate on his work. Mr. Cooper was an old friend, and Edward had assured him to find a cure for his sick wife, even if he himself was sure that even magic couldn't help her condition. Not the one he as a mortal was able to wield, at least. Still, he promised the desperate husband to cure the woman. Once the old man had left, Edward made for the cellar. The old familiar shiver went down his spine when the devil appeared in the circle that would hold him in place as long as he visited the mortal plane. It seemed to Edward the King of Hell was in a bad mood. There was a wrathful glimmer in those red eyes. "Why have you called me, occultist?" the deep voice growled. Edward was unsure of what he could say without angering the entity in front of him even further. If he wanted his plan to bear fruits, then he had to choose his words carefully now. "I know we didn't have a deal, so to speak, yet by sending the priest after the demon you mentioned, I did you a favor." The entity in front of him squinted its eyes as it considered Edward's words. "The rogue is still roaming free," Satan spoke in a scolding tone, his eyes gleaming with impatience. Again Edward held his ground despite the tension in his body. "But your words are reasonable." A menacing grin split the devil's lips. "Tell me your desire, and it is yours." For a moment Edward considered backing down and stopping with whatever he was doing. But Edward Calderwood was an ambitious man with a vision of the future, and therefore he ignored the voice in the back of his head, deeming it to be caused by his unsettling nightmares. "A woman is deathly sick. Human abilities can't heal her, but I believe a higher force could." Ringing laughter, which would have caused every human being to flee in sheer terror, filled the room. "Very well. Think of it no more," the fallen angel exclaimed gleefully. Holding out his hand, a flame emerged on it, and upon dying down revealed a small glass with a strange colored powder. Edward assumed it to be some kind of medicine and took the vessel, which was burning hot. "I hope the next time you summon me, it is to tell me that the rogue has been taken care of." The voice faded as flames engulfed the King of Hell, leaving nothing but a burnt smell and ashes. Edward leaned against the cold wall for a moment. His body felt weak and his mind was exhausted. He wondered if it would ever get easier for him to resist the demonic influences when dealing with entities from below. Upon entering the living room, the occultist saw a letter on the table. It was from Father Johnson and spoke about how he was in Rome lying in wait for the demon. It also said that he was sure to confront the demon and that if no second letter arrived, he surely will have been vanquished by the fiend. Edward made a mental note to be aware of any letters that might or might not come in the following days. He sincerely hoped that the father succeeded with his mission. Standing face to face with the devil when delivering a bad message was in no way pleasant, and it would probably strain the business-oriented relationship the occultist had with the King of Hell, a relationship Edward Calderwood valued above everything else. A bit more time, a few good news, and Edward was sure to be considered a valued man by Satan. If he would be able to accomplish that, then Britain would never have to fear anything. May it be supernatural or mortal, demons would be the absolute solution to every threat. While pondering on the next steps towards his final goal, Edward felt how heavy his legs suddenly felt. Deciding that it was late enough, he went to his room where his breakfast was still standing. Feeling famished, Edward choked down the cold food and went to bed. Sleep, however, struggled to take his mind away as he tried to ignore the subliminal whisper around him.